This is my topic, Backbone.rocks, large-scale web application build right. My name is Jeremy Lu. I'm from Taipei, Taiwan. I've been working here for a couple of years, moved back and moved to Beijing, then moved back here. So my English is a little bit rusty, and now my jet lag is just kicking in. So if I stop to speaking things that doesn't make sense, please just remind me. All right, what I'm gonna say today is I want to share our teams of experience for the past 10 years being burned over and over again building large-scale web applications. We come from a fresh experience, moved to Flex, building things like Outlook version on the web, and then later moved to JavaScript and jump to frameworks. So we got a lot of experience writing smelly code and get burned in the process. So in the end, we think, hey, from now on, every new hires in our company, we're gonna have a set of tutorials that we can dump and teach them to do the things right. All right, so what I'm gonna talk today is, first, I'm gonna go over the key concepts of what we learned in the past. It is the key to the successful large-scale web development. Then I'm gonna go over a little add-on we built for Backbone called Backbone.rocks, which we add a lot of those niceties to help your life easier. Okay, first, key concept for the successful large web dev. These are the key we identified throughout the years to be the most important parts for any successful web dev jobs. I know it's a lot, but in the end, if you have all these things set in your environment, you're gonna see it's worth it. So let's go over one by one. First is MV start. This is MVC, MVP, MVVM. You see all the buzzwords. This basically saying pretty much the same thing is model view controller or model view presenter or model view model. Depends on which website you see. The key concept here is clear separation of concerns. Probably you learned this from your back-end development experience while you were working in Java or .NET or Rails. But when applied MVC to front-end stuff, there's a huge twist of the concept which make junior developers confused. So you often see on Stack Overflow asking, hey, which MVC framework I should be using, Backbone, Angular, Ember, or Knockout. To me, they are pretty much the same. Any of them will do the tricks. They are basically MVC. If you know the concept well, any of these framework will do the trick. But the problem is, you need to know it well, and you need to do it right, which is often the problem. Okay, so in this regard, my suggestion would be pick one and know it really well, and also make sure everyone in your team knows it well. I know this doesn't make much sense, but later in this session, you will know how to do this. Secondly, this model-driven approach is the single most important thing I think I personally learned for the past 10 years. Model-driven is a very common phrase you may heard a lot, but in our little front-end dev circle, this actually means we have a single source of truths. What does it mean? If you come from a Rails background, you will notice immediately. Whenever you are building an application, you think in model. If you want to have anything displayed on the view, you think in model. You have that data in model first, then have a view refresh according to the model. Okay, this is it. So the basic flow is our views, probably your template or your JavaScript controllers. It will observe if there's anything changed in the model and refresh the view. So if you want to have the view changed, you will manipulate those data in the model, not the other way around. This is a huge mistake we made over and over again in my earlier career and get burned. In the early years, we would try to use jQueries and manipulate the DOM because it's easy, so you tend to do that. to make things happen. But later, when the application grows bigger, grows more complicated, you're gonna find it's out of control. You no longer know the status of your application. So after a while, you come to realize we really need to have a single source of truth, which is the model, to help you have an overall control of the system. By applying this concept, you will always have your application status and UI status maintained in a central place in a model, which makes it easier for debugging and testing. Say if you need something displayed on the page, but it's not there, there can only be two places that went wrong. One is the model, the other is the view. So you first test if my data is correctly stated in the model. If it's there and it's not on the page, it must be the displaying logic went wrong. So you go check your view, your template, your controller. Simple like that, no guessing work. Okay. And the other thing is modular design. This is also a very important thing we learned throughout the years. Again, in the days of jQueries, everybody writing closures with hundreds of lines in one files for one PHP, within one PHP files, and think, hey, this is cool, I can just encapsulate everything in one file. But later you find you are cramming too much thing in one script, and it becomes so tightly coupled that you can no longer maintain it. So later we learned we should cut the application into pieces, making each piece a smaller module. But when talking about modular, we are actually talking in the sense of a concept and the tooling. For the concept part, it's just like what I said, you are organizing the application into smaller self-contained units. Each unit is fully encapsulated and absolutely decoupled from the system. This is the most important experience I learned. You gotta do this right. Make every modular totally decoupled from the system. One of the benefits is it will be easier to split the job between the team. Everybody can work on their modules without worrying about interfering or depending on other people's work. And they can rest assured once their modules are completed, it can plug into the system and it will work. But of course, there's a couple of things needs to be in place to make this happen. But this is the first step. Take this screen for example. This is a very simple UI here. It can actually be broke down to 4 units, as you can see on the screen. So if I were to build this app today, I will write 4 smaller modules. Each modules are totally encapsulated and they don't know each other. And say in the search box on the top right, if I enter something there and I want to filter the data grid there, that search box never know there's a data grid outside. It won't know what will happen when keywords are entered. And if it needs to convey message to the system, it will do this via dispatcher event or doing this through a global signal bus, which I will mention later. But the basic idea is split your page into multiple units and make each unit encapsulated. Okay. If you do this, you can easily switch out each of the unit and it won't infect the system. Back in 2006, we built a system which is crazy enough to dynamically loading hundreds of modules depending on users' configuration. Just think a personal portal. They might have a video player, music player, and depending on their configuration, we might load in different players. So each of those modules are standalone units. They don't know each other. They don't know the system. There's just a preset API interface. So we can build hundreds of modules and know it will simply work once it was loaded. That's the beauty of the modular design. But things changed a bit when we moved to the web space because they are not like Java, they are not like ActionScript, they are not like those more object-oriented systems. In JavaScript, in the web world, module and the dependency are a little bit tricky to deal with until we finally require JS. This is a beauty of solve the problem. What require.js did is it helps you to load in every modules in a correct sequence. So in your index HTML, with this one line of code, see there's a source, you are actually invoking require.js, and there's a data main app. With this one line of code, you will have all your dependents loaded in correct sequence. No longer you have to look at your index file and arrange the sequence of your script element, saying, hey, I should have jQuery loaded first, then Lodash, then Bootstrap, then blah, 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 blah. You need to adjust the sequence. Or probably you don't have the problem because you have it all minified, concat in one file. But when in development, require.js will help you to write just that one line and manage all dependencies. Plus, there's a thing called RJS, is an optimizer, which will help you to combine and minify JavaScript files and do some preliminary CSS optimizations, which is a nice add-ons. But the most important of all is when choosing module AMD or module libraries, we pay special attention to testing. Does this module library work well with popular testing framework? In our case, we are now moving over to Comma. Before that, we were using TestZen. In our experiment, we have proved require.js works pretty well with Comma and TestZen. So this is a no-brainer. Then another very important concept here is dependency injection. This is also a very common word. It exists in Java for like 10 years or even longer. But it might be a little bit strange to the web world. The basic concept behind DI, dependency injection, is inversion of control. I know this is more confusing, so the explanation is here. This is watered down explaining. It means instead of hard coding your dependency, your code, you just inject them at runtime for max flexibility. The first time I read these 3 lines, it doesn't help, right? Doesn't help. Okay, let me show you an example. Look at this code. So there's a fake full module here, and in the constructor, you are pasting in bar and baz as the arguments. Then inside the function, you are doing something like creating new instance of bar and baz. This is a very typical way to do things, right? With DI in place, we will not paste in that bar and baz. We will just use variable r equals new bar. Where does bar come from? If you are using some sort of DI library, it will inject bar and base at the runtime. Probably you say this is no big deal. We just want that to thing there. No, this is a big deal because with a DI system in place, bar and base can be switched out to anything you want. Say you have got cool and do, you want to replace bar and base. Why you want to have cool and do replace bar and base? Probably you are testing the code, and cool and do are your mocked version of the same object. In the past, you have to use a mocked library like Signal.js to mock those data. But now with DI system, you can write a totally different set object and inject into this module, which will make your testing process a lot easier. All right, so let's go back a few pages. That example is basically the implementation detail of these 3 lines. Instead of hard coding dependency, you inject them. I know DI takes some time. For me, it takes like 3 years to fully appreciate the value of it. So your mileage may vary. Just take the time and learn it. Okay. Right, so basically the benefit is it helps to make each part of the app highly decoupled. Again, after burnt over and over again, we know how important to make things in module and how to make each module decoupled from each other, because it's not just for flexibility, it's also for highly maintainability. Okay. Also, this just DI goes hand in hand with modular design. They are just like the 2 most important parts when building applications. So the basic idea is we already have modules which are highly encapsulated, and now we are making everything that the module needs inside injected at runtime instead of hard-coded, which makes your module even more decoupled from the system. And the more decoupled, the better. Okay, so this is an example. Okay, this results in more easily maintainable and testable code. Okay, after surveying all the DI library out there, we finally settled down on this one. Trust me, this is not easy. There are like 10 DI library for browser. We have to test one by one and benchmark their performance and test their API reliability. We finally choose this one because it's lightweight, because its API is easy to understand. This one is hosted on GitHub. I think everybody, if you know DI, you can learn this thing in 10 minutes. But before you know DI, you need to spend like 3 years, like me, to appreciate the value. All right. Another thing is intermodule communication. This is like the top 10 most asked questions on any Backbone forum. People always asking, hey, I got a couple views on the screen and view A want to talk to view B. How do I do that? Or I have got multiple sub-views inside. How do I talk to my parent view? This is a FAQ. And throughout the years, it seems now the concept here is you're gonna have something like a global event bus. I think it's starting from Backbone 1.0. They are making Backbone object itself a signal bus. So the author says, if you need to broadcast something, just broadcast it through Backbone. You can just call Backbone.dispatch. They have something dispatch transmitted. This is an example, bus dispatch something. And another trendy things I see now is people are namespacing their events name. So this is like login view submit, which means submit events from login view. Okay, this looks good. This looks good back in 2000, 2004. Until we have that application grow out of control. Back then, I was working in a startup in San Jose. They are building an online photo book, and you can upload your photos, and they will print it and FedEx to your house. We built that in Flex. I was the #1 engineer, and we built everything according to the book, according to the best practice. And this global signal bus was the #1 good practice on book, so everybody followed. And where we got burned, we soon find out there are just so many events transmitting in the air all the time. So you never know who is doing what with that event. So if you, later in the dev cycle, when you see there's something strange happening on the view, you notice somebody triggering an event which caused this change. But I don't know where the event comes from. I don't know who dispatched that and when that was dispatched. So you can imagine the nightmare while debugging this whole thing. All right, so basically, in my experience, I know global signal bus is not quite such a good idea, and I know this might be deputable, okay? So our solution, for now, we think we are actually using an application model as a signal bus. Signal is just a fancy word for events. So you could just think application model is an event bus. What we are doing here, we create an app model as a global signal bus. And it also persists the application states. So let's take look at this example. The same login example, if in a view I need to log in someone in, instead of dispatch event, you can see the dimmed version, this is the old one there, bus, dispatch, blah, 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 blah. Now we are invoking the status on app model and say we are doing login, and this is actually the syntax from Backbone model. If you use Backbone, it should be very familiar. We are setting things through the model, and you might already know when you state something through the model, it will dispatch an event. So in your view, you can add event listener to that login and handle login there. You probably be thinking, what's the difference here? Dispatch, then add event listener should do the same trick. The difference here is it will be easier to track who is changing the application state and triggering the event, because I can always add a pre-hook or post-hook on the stator, so I know who invoked a state on login. And I can also know because this one is setting the value of login, it will trigger an event. And via some hackeries, you can also know who is listening to those events, and you know who's gonna respond to that. Okay. So, another added benefit of having an application model is everything is persisted in data model. So in the past, while we were building application in phone gap, sometimes we will have to let the app work offline. So if user made changes to the application user interface, we can just persist it in the application model, and when next time it goes online, we can sync the model back to the server. So the user interface and the preference setting are always synced. This is some nicety here, but in my opinion, I will try my best to avoid using a global signal bus. I will instead use the application model. I'm not 100% sure this is right. Maybe 6 months from now, I got burned again, then I will change my mind. But we've been using this thing for like 3 years, and life is good so far. So, okay. All right, another thing is automated build system. In the beginning, everybody thinks we just needed to manually do everything, but nowadays, as a front-end developers, we need to constantly pre-compile a lot of things. You need to pre-compile SAS, Lace, CoffeeScript, or any other things you use. So soon you're gonna find having a auto build system in place will help your life easier. Basically, a auto build system will just help you to compile, minify, watch for changes. It's like a huge helper. Okay, so if you're using any of these SAS, CoffeeScript, or JavaScript, or for JavaScript, you might be minifying or concat files all the time. Automated build system will help you to do this. Okay, it's a huge time saver. All tools of choice, of course, Node.js and Ground. Also, although I know people from Rails world tend to use Jekyll, which is good, but we are more familiar with Ground, so we choose this. And testing. Testing is something everybody knows important, and your conscience telling you should be doing that, but you know the rest, right? But again, after being burned again, we know we gotta do something in this space. It took us like 5 years to finally truly embrace testing as part of workflow. So now we do strict BDD and TDD. We do pretty much everything. We write a use case, we write a user story, we transcript the user story to BDD, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, we are now settled down on this combination. We are using Comma as our test runner is from Angular team. And we are using Mocha as the test framework, and the Char as the allusion library, and Sinon as the, I should strike Sinon off because we are no longer using mock object. We are using DI to inject different version. But basically, these 4 library works pretty well for most of the web front-end development job. Excuse me? No? Okay. Once you get familiar with these 4 things, a very logical step will be to build yourself a CI system, which is a continuous integration system. What is a CI? CI is whenever you check in some code into GitHub, they will have web hooks, and it will trigger your build system to check out the code, to run the test, and if it's all greens, it will deploy this thing to your staging server, and if everything runs well on your staging server, it will deploy it to your production server. This whole thing can be automated, and if anything goes wrong in the process, it will send an email to you, it will send a message to you, even it's 2 a.m. in the night, so you can just jump off the bed and try and see what happens. But the key is having an automated system in place can often make you sleep better in the night, because you know if something went wrong, you will know first, instead of in the morning, your boss call you, hey, my website is down, where are you? Right. So, since these here are a couple of CI systems, for the last 3, Jenkins, Circle CI, and Travis CI, they are all hosted services. Probably for some companies, you are not comfortable having your source code transmitted to third-party websites, you will want to build your own in-house CI system. If this is you can try Strider CD. This is built on Node.js and Ground, which is, in our opinion, very easy to use, but it's not as full-fledged as Circle CI or Travis CI. If we can manage to spend, can consider those two. Okay. Let's talk about a little bit house rules for the quality control. Okay. Pretty much now, every team or every client I work with have this set of rules in place. Almost everybody is using Git, no matter it's hosted as a private GitHub or a private Bitbucket, or you have your self-hosted Git repos on Linux or DigitalOcean or AWS. And everyone always working in their own feature branch. And when the feature is done, you send a pull request. You probably see these things a lot in the open source world, but now in private enterprise dev work, this is the standard workflow. You don't just merge your branch back into master. This is bad, because if something went wrong, also it will be very difficult to revert back or to, anyway, send a pull request. So your colleague can code review and discussion possible revisions with you first, then merge back. And when you are merging back, there are actually two possible choices here. Most people are using merge, but to make the branch line simpler, you might consider rebase. So oftentimes we use rebase more than merge these days, because we find it does the same job, but makes things a lot simpler when you're looking at the branch, the fork lines in Git. Okay. And a couple of teams I work with, they are also using Git flow. This is like a standardized workflow. You have a production, you have a staging, you have a feature branch. So this little toolkit help you to move your code from branch to branch to branch. This is like a guideline for junior developers. All right. Well, of course, to build successful web application, you have to have a deep understanding of JavaScript, which there's a couple of sessions today, which is really good. And these are some of books I think is worth reading: The Good Part, Effective JavaScript, and JavaScript Ninja. But of course, there are a bunch of information all over Stack Overflow. And these are the 6 most important things. Actually, these are the 6 questions we were asking in an interview for a new hire. Of course, the questions are modified, but the key concept is we were asked, do you know closure? How many kind of closures are there, and what's the effect? Blah, 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 these things. These are very basic stuff, but I'm very surprised to find a lot of junior developers don't really know this. They just think JavaScript is JavaScript. How hard can it be? What can you go wrong with it? Believe me, you can. All right, so recap. Key concepts for successful large-scale web development is these things. Have all these things built in your workflow, have your team learn every part of it. You will have a strong team, and you can build pretty much everything, and you can sleep at night, which is good. All right, so this is the second part, AntiBackbone. Okay. Backbone has been popular for the past couple of years. It's popular because it's simple, but it's dangerous because it's simple. This is my take for the past couple of years. You will say, what? Is simple? Simple is good, right? No, it's not. Most people think Backbone is an MVC framework, but I took this word framework very seriously. To me, Backbone is actually a meta library. It's not a fledged framework. In contrast, what is a full-fledged framework? Flex is a huge framework. Angularjs, Ember.js, Knockout.js, they are full-fledged framework. They got everything from UI to and dependency injection to controller to pretty much everything are there. You just need to follow their set of rules and you are good. But Backbone doesn't provide all those things. Backbone, as you see in the name, backbone, it's like the the very basic stuff you need. It has a model collection, it has a view, it has a simple routing system, and that's pretty much it. It's simple, but because it's simple, it can be misused, especially when there are a lot of junior developers on the team. They think they know MVC. They think Backbone is a MVC style of framework. So they just got creative. This is the most important, and this is the most dangerous part. For me, I think the lack of explicit guideline for how to do certain things, certain way, is the most dangerous part of Backbone. This is not to say Backbone is bad. It is good if you know how to use it. If you are experienced, Backbone is a godsend. But if you are not one of those, this is a little bit dangerous, and you might shoot in your foot. This is where Backbone.rocks comes from. We have been using Backbone for like the past 4 years. Backbone it first showed up in the internet. Throughout the years, we are adding some stuff to make Backbone better. So after 5 years, we aggregate everything into a nice add-on called Backbone.rocks. Basically, we implemented the gist of those aforementioned the key concept. Remember the like 10 bullet on the page. We implemented those things that we think is important on top of Backbone. So basically, it's an add-on to Backbone. It's also a dev showcase for how to do large-scale web application. And it's also a free ebook available on GitHub. So this is the link. Then I'm gonna show you some demo. Oh. Right, so this is the simple application we built for the demo. Oh, one thing I got to say, this is an example adapted from another open source project from Adobe, this Chris Conrad. I think he's around today. I don't get the chance to meet him. He built this very beautiful application. Oops. And all right, so now I can see it. Okay, this is the application. Where's my cursor? Oh, okay. All right, so all the source code is available on GitHub on that URL. We are just trying to demonstrate a very typical CRUD kind of application you might be building with Backbone, with all these infinite scroll list here, search as you type search box, and pagination on large scale, on large collections, and those changes, and you can edit. And again, I gotta pay. I gotta say thanks to Chris Conrad for providing all those nice images and the basic page layout. He has got a 3-part tutorial on his blog explaining his way of doing Backbone application. I just add on top of that. Okay, so this is okay, let me move back to my, okay. All right, so you might want to write down this URL so you can later, or you can just search Backbone.rocks on GitHub. Okay, this is a screen cap and part of it. Okay, all right. So there are 3 parts that I want to go over with this application and the approach. Basically, we add these 3 nice new features on top of Backbone. We design it to be declarative. So in Backbone models, you don't have those kind of things. Another popular questions on Stack Overflow and the Backbone forum is, how do I do one-to-many properties on Backbone model? Because Backbone model doesn't support that. And we want it, and we find there's a couple of implementations from other frameworks, but those implementations seems a little bit too complicated for us, so we roll our own. But basically, you can do something like this on your model. Inside your model, you can say, hey, I have a report property, and I need its content is composed of a report collection, and I can lazily initialize it, which means, say, there are like 10 records in report collection, but those 10 records will not be initialized immediately. It will wait until the moment you need it. It's called a lazy loading or lazy initialization. So this is the one-to-many properties. Then we have got these declarative validators for property. As if you build enough CRUD style application, you know validators on your model is important, especially if you are Rails developer, you know how important validators are. So this is a validator. We got the first name and the last name on the model. We just declare, hey, when something changed in first name, we want to run validate name, then there's this validates there. So you get the idea. Then we have got the declarative default value for the model. You might be thinking, why this is important? In Backbone model, there's no place to set the default value. Actually, there is, but if you're doing this all way, we can automatically reset the value of the model when needed. If you set this using the original Backbone's model's defaults object, it will never get reset once it was changed. And this will cause some problem. In certain situation, you might have the model reset. This thing is in place, you just use it. And for the view part, we also have a declarative model event handler. Remember, we said model is the single source of truths, and view should always be observing the model. When model dispatch events, view redraws itself. This is the concept. This one, declarative model event handler, is the implementation details. So in your view, you can say something like this. Hey, whenever report collection, each dispatch and reset event, I want to trigger my reset handler to do the view rephrase things. You can do this now. You just write more code. We just make this thing a little bit easier to nicely encapsulate it in your object and doing this in a declarative way. Okay, so then cascading sub view handling. This is even more detailed stuff. You can just look through the code and the commands. We also added automated view disposal. One of the problem of Backbone view is if you have a lot of subviews nested and you switch views a lot, some of those views will not be disposed and you will have a memory leakage. So if you find in the dev tools that memory lines is always going up onto the top right, you know you got the leakage. And it's normal in Backbone. We got this thing in place. Okay, so, and, this is some niceties. We designed this simple application to work with any client-side template technology and the fully RWD interface using Bootstrap. Who don't do this these days? Okay, then another key, feature highlight of this Backbone application is we try to use a couple of rich UI components, because this is also more asked on Stack Overflow. People saying, hey, how do I integrate jQuery UI or Can-Do UI or some fancy UI he saw on the internet, how to integrate that into Backbone. So we tried to handpicked a couple of UI components that we think is good for the job. For this pagination, this is actually very hard. Backbone collection doesn't come with paginated, any paging capability, which means if you got 1,000 records, they don't let you retrieve 100 at a time, so you can page the collection into 10 pages. But fortunately enough, there's a lot of libraries out there doing this. After the survey, we picked this one, Backbone Paginator. This one has the most simple UI and I think the most efficient ones. And combine this with Bootstrap UI, we built this nice little thing. I know it is just like a couple of buttons down there, nothing special, right? But there's a lot of things going on. The collection is paginated, and you need to hook the paginated collection to the UI component, so you know how to update the UI. And again, collection is a model. Model is the single source of truth. Your view should refresh itself according to the states of the collection. This is a sample here. Okay, so Backbone paginator. And X-editables, this one is really a gem. This one is like a list on steroid. It provides a lot of good stuff. I would like to demo this, but my browser is in another screen. I can use that, so just try this on your own. And this one, select to is another great enhancement to the list. It helps you to implement search result type, and you can do these drag and drop things and take inside a text area. They have all these things wrapped in a nice API, so you can just drop into your Backbone view, and voila, it will work. And this is infinitely cool. Okay, so this is the 4 UI components we use throughout the application. If you want to know how to use that, if you want to know the details, just look at the source code. Right, and some miscellaneous stuff about this approach. Throughout the code, we use full OR approach. With prototypal inheritance whenever possible. And we also have examples on how to override your model and the collections sync. Sync is the less understood idea of Backbone collections model. Backbone assumes you are always using RESTful API, which is create, update, put, delete. But if you need to work with some legacy code where they are feeding you with XMLs, or you are working in a totally offline environment, you need to persist the data in local database. Built-in collection sync won't help you there. You need to override that. But there are multiple ways to do this. We demonstrate how to do this in 3 ways in the source code. And also, we have a demo for the controller. Remember, on the first page, we say Backbone is an MVC framework library. Actually, it's a general common sense. People think there's no controller in Backbone. There's model, there's view, there's no controller. But also, but as always, this is deputable. Everybody have a different take on this. Anyway, if you think there's no controller in Backbone, but you think you need to have a controller to encapsulate some of the business service stuff inside, we have a demo in the source code. You can look at it. And some of other niceties is we have got customer routing. And we built in internationalization and the localization to the framework. This one I really want to demo. But first, I need to get my mouse. Okay. See this. You can have a look at the URL now. We have got, I think it's using English now, so let's choose the second one here. Using the whole UI interface is changed. I think it's Chinese. Can read it from here. Okay, and you can see the URL, the location changed. This is not something built in Backbone. We build the whole thing inside. You just follow our rules. You will have IATN stuff here. Okay. Then. Okay, so this is pretty much about Backbone and Backbone.rocks. At the end of the speech, I want to say a few words about Angularjs. After we built Backbone.rocks, like 6 months later, we found that, hey, there's this thing called Angular, which has pretty much everything incorporated. Right, but there's a huge but. I mentioned I come from a Flex background. If you know Flex is good. It's huge. It does everything for you with just one problem. It's heavy. It's slow. It's barely usable. So when I first seen those dual-way data binding and see those magics behind. The first thing come to my mind is, wow, is this Google version of Flex, and will it be so slow that I can build fast? I can build the application fast, but it will run faster in the browser. So I do have my hesitation on adopting Angular, although I know those guys are good. They know what they are doing, and they are actually doing what we are doing for Backbone.rocks. So we spend a lot of time benchmark Angularjs and trying to build some smaller application. In the end, we find actually Angularjs is pretty good. So blah, 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 blah. But just look at the last line. Although it's good, it has a very, very steep learning curve. You can build a nice UI with two-way data binding in 5 minutes, yes. But it might take you 3 weeks to write your first directive. If you're ever going down that way, you know that. And it will take much longer to have your whole team learn Angular. And at the same time, they have to do their daily jobs. This is not easy. This is something I'm still working on. So basically, I have a small team composed of 3 senior developers. We are working on Angular books. And again, just like Backbone.rocks, it's originally our internal training material. Now we are working on our internal training material for Angularjs rocks. When it's done, it will be open sourced. Okay. So basically, this is a good thing. How to choose? If there's a new project, especially if it's CRUD style, I think you go with AngularJS if you already know how to use it. But just like most of us, we are stuck in legacy projects. We are already in long-going projects. We have to use what we have now. So existing project, or if it's Doom UI heavy project, keep on using Backbone. And better yet, if you want to try Backbone.rocks, give it a try. Okay, so this pretty much it is. This is me. We built a tool. We built a toy project called visualmarks.com. I want to show this by my browser. Okay, so this is like a markdown editor with WYSIWYG preview on the left. This is a free tool. So this is just a proof of concept. We use this project to test how jQuery, Backbone, and Angular perform. We need a real-world project to build and build 3 versions of it. The one online is a simple version using jQuery, but we have a Backbone version and the Angular version in-house. Yeah, give it a try. Right, so this is what I'm doing. This is my email, and I can speak Chinese and Japanese. So if you want to talk to me, these two, you can use these languages. Thank you.